Welcome to the show, Cari. You've been here before. You know how this goes. You get to share all the good stuff that's happening around you.
Yes, thank you. I love it. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. We have a couple of extra guests in the second and third segment who will be sharing their stories, and we'll get to them in a little bit. But I wanted to have you on here first to give a background to the program, the speakers program. Career Connected Learning specifically is what it's called, and you're its specialist. Tell us about it, a bit about it, and we'll talk a little bit more about the opportunities people have to view it.
Yeah, well, right now, we just have to be really, intentional about navigating, what's happening, with public health, considerations. So it's changed the way we go about career connected learning. We're out in a facility, whether it's touring a manufacturing facility or having an in-person workshop, some sort of an event in person. Those aren't as easy to do right now. So we've switched gears a little bit and invited those industry partners to participate in really identifying what their career and what their company is all about via Zoom with our classes. So we're bringing the guest speakers, we're bringing the companies and the corporations to the students in the classroom. Sometimes we're able to do in person, as long as we follow all the guidelines. But for the most part, we've just been dialing in via Zoom. And it's been a really, it's been a terrific, way of just kind of taking that left turn. Like, we're used to doing this, but we're going to have to, look at it a little bit differently. And really what's happened then is, you bring those business professionals into the classroom. There's a little bit more one-on-one. There isn't the actual, where the students are in the facility and maybe they're in awe of everything that they're looking at. And it allows for a little bit more dialogue. So we've had a lot of really, very real conversations about what was the career path that you took to get where you're at. And I think what the students are learning across the board, we've been doing this since September, I believe, mid-September, early October. Across the board, they're learning that many professionals didn't know what they were going to do when they were sitting in the classroom their senior year or junior year. And that they took a lot of left turns and a lot of right turns.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yes.
Yeah. So
yeah.
I think that's been universal, and it's been very real and genuine. And I think the kids are identifying with that. In fact, I know they're identifying with that because we're getting feedback, from every student after each guest speaker is there. So.
Well, your organization took one of the bigger pivots that I've witnessed locally, right? Because you were in classrooms. We have a program with the Don't Wait Project that's in classrooms, and try as we might to have pivoted that program, it was nearly impossible because it was such a hands-on thing. And you think, oh, how are we going to do this? We used to do it this way. So I really commend you all for figuring out a way to do that and still reach the students, because I can't imagine all of these months going by without your connection to them.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, it was very happenstance. I was visiting with a teacher up at Elmira Cooley Heartline. It was during summer hours. So really, she's working on her master's, had a million other things she should be doing, but I needed to gather some time from her. And so I took her paddleboarding, and we started kind of talking about one of the new classes that she was going to be hosting with her seniors. And it was really her idea. Mrs. Getz up at ACH was like, I want to bring in guest speakers. We really want to do this once a month. And what happened is just this fireball of once a month became really once a week at Elmira Cooley Heartline. And then some of the other school districts, it became once a week as well, just because they were able to provide to me every single open class time that they had. So we had the day and we had the time already provided to us. So it was easy for me then to go and contact all of my business professionals and say, listen, I've got this time and this date that we can schedule. Are you open? And it just allowed for this flow of support, community support. And that's really what it takes. It takes a village, as they say. We've had guest speakers from throughout Grant County, all kinds of different industry, but we've also had guests far and wide. We've had college students speak to us from Ohio State University. We've had military personnel speak to us. They actually participated in the airlift in Kabul. So really, the community has definitely come together to support, this program. So it's been terrific.
So it's a big variety, quite a variety of speakers that you have coming. I get to speak in May, and I don't know how many turns I've taken left, right, and backwards too. For every couple steps you take forward, you take another one backward. But I think that you said earlier that that's a common theme. And I think that that's an important thing for young people to know. They tend to think they want to know exactly, they think they know exactly where they're going next. And when that doesn't happen, there's all this discouragement, maybe a sense of failure, or letting some people down, or just thinking, wow, this adult part isn't so much fun. But that is part of the fun. If you can teach them that there is a lesson in every single pivot and turn, just as they're learning right now, that there is a lot to accomplish, and you have hopefully years and years to do that. So it's a very forgiving process, I think, finding your career path, if you allow it to be.
Yeah. And one of the things I alluded to a little bit earlier is after each guest speaker comes in, we actually have a survey that the students fill out, and we're asking them really very honest questions about, did you relate to this speaker? If so, what about the speaker, did you relate to? And if not, what are you looking for? What do you want to hear about? And that allows us really to kind of feed into exactly what those students are asking for. And, the number one response that we're hearing right now is mental health. And again, you're going to meet another guest speaker that we've had, Kea Yamamoto, who came in and very courageously, told her story. And honestly, with a lot of humor. I mean, it was brilliant the way that she chose to share the story out. And you could see the kids, you could see the students nodding their heads and leaning in intently to hear her story. And that's been the number one request at this point, is more speakers about mental health. Let's hear a little bit more about that. And I think they're starving, for not only that, but then to know that authentically, none of us just landed where we are magically and very easily. We've all had the bumps and turns in the road. So that connection with the students is something that, to be honest with you, I haven't seen before in career connected learning. When we did, the tours every Tuesday with the manufacturers in Grant County, or we did evening events that included parents where we would bring them into industry partners to learn about that, you could see some light switches going off for certain, in terms of, oh, I never knew this existed. Yeah, I've got some interest in this. But this is at the very human level of who we all are and what we've been struggling with, say, for the last 18 months, if not longer.
If not longer, yes. Well, I commend what you're doing. I'm so happy to share it with our audience, and I'm looking forward to sharing the stories of the next two guests with everyone as well. Really compelling stories, and you have a way of disseminating information and collecting your people and reminding your people and collecting your people and reminding your people. And so I'm very honored to be on your spreadsheet for May.
Yes, and
So
I'm honored to have you.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Cari, and you're welcome here anytime.
All right, thank you. Look forward to coming back.
Lane Justus is one of the speakers that Cari was speaking about through their program, and she's coming to us all the way from Mexico. Thanks for being here, Lane.
Of course.
That's one of my favorite names. It was on my list when I was a kid of what I wanted to name either my boy or my girl, actually.
Really? I love it. I do love it. It's pretty unique.
It is unique. Well, thank you for being here. And we just want to familiarize, Cari did a good job of letting the audience know about the speaker series and what the purpose of it is. And I just wanted to speak with you more directly about your story. And first of all, why you chose to share it in this way with the speakers group.
Perfect.
So why did you decide to share it?
Oh, so I had a change of career path pretty early on when I was in college. Well, I guess I went through about 3-4 years of college thinking that I was going to be a doctor. And there's a lot of pressure on that. And in my final kind of semesters, I decided that maybe that isn't what I wanted to do. And I love my job now as a biologist. And I really thought it was important to not only share about the field of biology, but also share that from someone young, it's okay to change fields. It's okay to not know what you want to do. It's okay to have doubt. It's okay to try different things, even if maybe your family wants you to do something, if you have interests in other things. And so for me, it's really important that they hear that. And also that they know that even if maybe they're not interested in a career as a biologist, there are a lot of fields that pertain to like nature. And so I worked for the Nature Conservancy in Washington, which is how I met Cari. And we need accountants, we need lawyers, we need all kinds of people to help us run the organization. So even if they have an interest in nature, it's really cool to hear from someone that has experience in that field and can give them ideas of maybe how they can combine their interests and a career, even if they don't match up.
When you first made the decision, what were you starting out thinking you wanted to do? And then what are a couple of the steps in between that got you where you are?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started out thinking I wanted to be a doctor. I had worked at a kids camp for children with disabilities.
Since you were a kid, for as long as you could remember, you wanted to be a doctor?
I think maybe when I was younger. So my dad is actually a biologist, but he is in a totally different field than I am. He's in aquatic biology. It has to do more with chemistry. And so I was exposed to nature a lot as a child, but as I grew up, I started gravitating towards the medical field. Occupational therapy, I was really interested in. I worked at a kids camp for children with disabilities, which involved a lot of caretaking, working with doctors and nurses, and things like that. And I was really interested in it. So I went to college thinking I'm going to medical school, and that's that. And I started, and as I was working to that, I decided, I have some extra credits. Why don't I take some classes that I maybe enjoy a little bit more? I didn't think anything of the fact that maybe I didn't like all my classes. I mean, some of them are interesting, but microbiology, organic chemistry, those weren't my favorite things. I did well in the classes, but I was like, let's take something interesting or a little bit more interesting. So I started studying political science, health studies, and then I looked into environmental law and things like that. And I had the opportunity to study abroad in Costa Rica in my sophomore year of college. And I worked in a hospital, took Spanish for health professionals. I took classes on public health care in Costa Rica and what that means for the country and how it works. But I knew that for medical school, I needed to complete research. And I hadn't yet done that at the University of Arkansas, where I went. And so I started looking into research at the university that I was at in Costa Rica, and they had a shark laboratory that looked at genetics and using genetics to search for conservation solutions. So shark finning, stingrays, things like that. We looked at all of it, and sea turtles as well. And so I worked with them, and I was just working in laboratory. And then the last couple weeks of the summer, they were like, well, you haven't had the opportunity to go out to the beach and do the field work yet. How would you feel about helping us go tag some stingrays and catching some sea turtles to get DNA samples? And I was like, of course. And so I went, and I absolutely loved it. And then I went back to the University of Arkansas a little bit later and wrote a grant I have another degree in Spanish, and I needed to complete a Spanish thesis as well as a biology thesis. And I wrote a grant to do a public health centered thesis in Costa Rica. And so they paid me to go back. And nice. So I made it a little bit of my own. And so I did my interviews and my thesis, but at the same time, I was doing field work for biology. And then after that, it was pretty much, I was in this competition with myself. My brain was in like a competition. Which one would be better for me? What is everyone going to think of if I change my field? I've already worked so hard in this field. I'm already studying for the MCAT. What's going to happen if I change my mind? And then I got back to the University of Arkansas again, and I found a laboratory that worked with rainbow trout. And it worked with ion exchange in gills of rainbow trout, which is similar to how our kidneys function. So I could tie it to medicine if I wanted to, but it was also something that I really liked to do. I really liked working with the fish. And so And then that kind of snowballed into, I think that I like this more.
So there's all these things that kept leading you to from one step to the next step and then the next step. And I think that when people are listening to you, so young students who are trying to make their decisions, it really helps them to understand all of the past. That's one of the things that Cari and I were talking about, is the left and the right turns and the step backward. And then you were trying to be decisive in terms of taking paths that would allow for you to still have a choice. So ultimately,
Exactly.
the decision that you made to be a field biologist was different than becoming a physician. And what is the one thing, we're just wrapping up here, but what is the one thing you would say to young people about your particular path, but how that relates to so many others?
I would say that I didn't have a linear path, and it was really hard for me to change based on the expectations of others, based on what I expected of myself, and how I'm pretty like plan oriented. And so I did not want to change. It was so hard for me. But in the end, when I look at it, it really doesn't seem like a nonlinear path. All the positions that I had, I worked in a pharmacy, at the kids camp, everything has led to where I am. I had supervisor experience. I had other kinds of stuff that helped me get jobs in the field of biology that maybe I didn't think of. I didn't think working in a pharmacy was going to help me get a supervisor job in a field camp for studying birds, but
Right.
it did,
Or that
and I
you would
could
even
relate
end
them all
up doing
together.
something like, or that you would even end up doing something like that. Well, I think that's a good
Exactly.
message. I think that that's why this program, the Career Connected Learning, is so important to connect in the classrooms with the students right now before they head out into the big world and have all these anticipations and expectations put on themselves, usually by themselves, like they've put those there. Maybe some parents, hopefully not too much of that, but most definitely it gives them something to look at for their own lives and how they'll look back to your story and think, okay, well, this is how Lane did it, and it all worked out. Now joining is Kea Yamamoto. She is here, one of the Career Connected Learning presenters. And I just wanted to thank you for being here, and also just ask you to give an overview of what you shared during your time with the organization.
Yes, thanks for having me, Lisa. When I was speaking with the Quincy High School students, I was sharing my story of dealing with mental health, specifically bipolar disorder, as I grew up. And it was really special because I got to talk to the age group of kids that I was going through that struggle with. And so sharing that story with them really gives me a purpose. And that's why I've always shared my story.
When you shared it with them, that is an interesting part, because a lot of times as we grow up and become adults, we might give a keynote, we might give a presentation somewhere else, but we're talking largely to other adults. So it is unique in that you have a perspective, having gone through that time in your life, and now you're going back and talking to people who are going through it. And what was the main part you wanted to get across? I'd imagine just wanting them to know that they're not alone, that there is hope, and that, their mental health is a real thing that now, luckily, fortunately, we're paying more attention to in a school setting.
Yeah, I really wanted them to kind of have a sense of, again, no one is alone in something like that, but I came from a small school. I come from Kashmir, and I grew up in the Kashmir School District, and I went through the Kashmir School District 10 years ago. So if you can think of what the perception of mental health was 10 years ago, even, it was a lot different than it is now. And so kind of my message is that I'm just so grateful that people are pushing more towards being open about mental health, and still it's a little stigmatized, and I really want that to kind of start going away.
And what do you think about what you shared specifically? Like, how did you go about deciding? Was there anything too personal, or were you an open book? How did you decide about what part of your story you were comfortable sharing? Or I guess making the decision to share it all kind of opens you up to sharing that part of your personal story.
That's a good question. So kind of what sparked me sharing my story was that, first of all, I'm a terrible liar. Like, I've never been good at lying. I really struggled with that since I was young. And so when I had to go and spend 2 weeks at a mental institution in Kirkland, Washington, when I came back and my friends were wondering, where were you for part of the summer? I just didn't have a good explanation. And so I just decided that I was going to be open about it. And I told my best friend first, and luckily she was super supportive. And that really gave me some hope in telling my other friends.
So you told the truth from the start.
Yes, I did.
But that makes it easier to tell the truth forever, right?
For sure. Yeah. It was, my family and I were kind of going with the idea of telling people that I have a chemical imbalance in my brain. Well, if you have a brain yourself, you're going to figure out that that has to deal with mental health. So it kind of just became, well, I should just tell the truth. And if people are going to, be accepting, then they are. And if they're not, then that's going to be a bummer for both of us. But that's just kind of how I decided to live my truth.
When you shared your story, and when you share your story now, whether it's to a group of people in a social setting, can you see the big difference between 10 years ago and now? Where do you feel that most in terms of the perception of what mental health is, or mental illness?
Yeah, honestly, speaking to Quincy High School was the first time I've spoken to that age group of kids. I spoke in college in some of my classes about mental health, but what was shocking to me in all those situations is just how much more open people are about mental health now, but still just a feeling of when I'm talking to people about it in that sort of setting,
right,
people definitely still really clam up. And so I'm hoping that if I keep being open about my story, that it brings kind of those, I guess, barriers or walls down a little bit for people.
Well, I feel like I am a storyteller for a living. It's what I do in different formats and different platforms. And it has the power to heal lives. It is about lending our story, if it helps someone else better live or tell their own, whatever that story is. And with you being willing to share that, and them being able to see that, wow, you can have those struggles at that age, you can be heard, it can be understood, and you can have now a successful life.
Yeah, one of the things that I really try to convey to the students is that, yes, it was a really struggling time, but my family, the way we've dealt with it and the way I deal with it is there's some times that were really funny and like we can go back and laugh on. And I consider those times the rough times. And so, meeting new friends and even my old friends, some of our favorite stories are during the rough times, because even though they were tough, we got through them.
One of the things when I've gone through something hard in my life, I always say, if you stick around long enough, if I stick around my life long enough, it always gets better.
Yes, that's
gotta stick around and do the work. Well, I appreciate you sharing today. And I know that Cari appreciates that you shared. And it is just a valuable tool to meet the young people where they are, and to have an opportunity to educate them in something other than a typical education, a book or anything like that.
Definitely. And giving them someone who really hasn't been through school that much. It hasn't been
Not that long ago.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. Keep up the good work, and thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for having me.